Welcome back, folks, to another one of our talks. Apologies, we were running a little bit behind schedule, but we're going to keep the train running quickly. Just a reminder to people, if you want to be in with a chance of winning yourself some freebies, some ebooks, make sure that you take advantage of our knowledge partners, Packet Company. All you have to do to be in with a chance of winning those ebooks is make sure that you rate the sessions, leave comments, and definitely interact the Q&A. And hopefully, someone who's going to have plenty of questions for you to ask. I'm going to pass it over to Alex now, who's going to talk to you about GTM strategies.
Great, thank you. So today my talk is going to be on go-to-market strategies, finding product market fit, and really how you can go about finding or going from 0 in revenue to 5 million in revenue with some things that I've learned along the way. So I'm a sales leader, angel investor, and I'm a go-to-market advisor for Spiky.ai, which is a video analytics platform for revenue teams. So before diving in, a little background about myself and where this advice comes from. So I'm one of those crazy people that have done 5 early stage startups, 5 Series A companies. Some of them have been really successful, like Acquia that exited for $1 billion, and Sneak that's valued at $8.6 billion, and then others that have got acquired early or pivoted, and some that are to be determined. But along this journey, I've seen kind of like what works really well, what doesn't work, and some strategies that can help you optimize your journey in terms of launching a company and getting to your first set of paying customers. So that journey can be like really hard. Startups are extremely difficult. Especially building a product from scratch, figuring out who your customers are, finding them, and then eventually selling them and converting them into paying customers. None of these companies have been specifically easy. They all come with their different challenges. But if you apply a process and you apply some strategic thinking, then that can help you find the path to that revenue and product market fit a lot easier. So today, want to talk about a couple of those things. So first, it's important to look at why do startups fail. This was a recent report done by CB Insights, and if you look at the top reasons, it comes down to ran out of cash or failed to raise new capital. Usually, companies that can't raise capital are ones that ultimately don't find product market fit and aren't able to sell and find revenue. No market need. I mean, that goes hand in hand with product market fit, basically building something that people want and you're solving a problem that people have. And then less so is you get outcompeted or you have a flawed business model, and then there's a long list of other reasons why startups fail. But today we'll focus on product market fit and revenue and optimizing for how you can guard yourself against the top two from happening. So first, the first big lesson that I learned in my career at the first startup, Acquia, was you really want to set out with a hypothesis and be really open to changing that hypothesis over time as you gain more insights and data from your customer base. So the goal really is to seek the truth and what is reality. You may have a great idea and great hypothesis. Hey, this is going to solve someone's problem, but in reality, there may be a bunch of other solutions out there that can do it in other ways, or they might not prefer the way that you're going about it. So a story from the early days of Acquia. Acquia was commercializing an open source product called Drupal. Drupal is used to build websites, and Drupal had a bunch of different modules for building all sorts of different functionality into those websites. So maybe it's integrating Facebook or adding images or videos, anything you can imagine. There were literally hundreds of these. So in the beginning, the hypothesis was, well, we'll select maybe the top 20 or 30 of these modules and provide ongoing support for them. we thought, okay, we'll come out of the gates with that, and customers will be, very eager to buy into that and gain support for those, really critical modules. What we found out was that hypothesis was actually wrong, and this was within the first, several weeks. What we realized was the feedback came in, and customers said, "Well, we have these 20 to 30 modules. We use them very heavily. However, what about these other like 50 modules that I use? If I can't get support for those, then you're not really solving my problem." So what we had to do is actually change our entire subscription model from just providing support for those initial modules to providing support for every single Drupal module that could be out there, or any new Drupal modules that could be developed by the community. So we had to change our model right out of the gates. Then our next hypothesis was around, you have to keep these modules like up to date. And since we're working with engineering teams and developers, we realize ultimately what they want to do is they want to spend their time building cool features. They're creators. They want to build software. So we thought, well, what if we took all of those module updates out of their hands and we took those over? That would be able to give the developers more time to do the things that they love and create more of a compelling reason for them to buy our services. So came back to the team with this feedback, and we had a new hypothesis about a new product, and we thought, okay, well, how could we test this product? And so what we did was we came up with, very high, this was over the course of like literally a day, came up with a description, some parameters for how we were going to support it. And then from there, we just started adding it on to the original subscription. And that gave us like a new set of like insights. And so from there, we realized, hey, we'll support all the different modules. And then we'll add on our second product, which would be to update those modules. And then bingo, stuff started to really happen in an interesting way. People loved the initial base subscription. And then we had the second subscription to upsell to our existing customers, but then also land new customers. So we figured out that if we're going into a customer and helping them in both areas, we actually increased our chances of landing or winning that deal. So my main point here is be really open to really seeking the truth and reality, because no matter how much you think you may know, about your problem and solution area, you're going to find insights along the way. Leverage those insights to create new hypotheses and improve your product over time. And if you continually do this, you're going to end up with a product that that's optimized for the people that you really want to sell to. So the next comes into, this is a basic thing, but I see a lot of companies that don't take enough time to do this in terms of profiling your ideal company, buyers, and users. So I add in user persona here because in a modern go-to-market motion, historically you have marketing and sales going top down to leadership and trying to sell them. But now today you have new motions emerging where you're not only going top down, but you have this PLG motion. And that's really getting users to adopt your product first, see some value, and then you can go up the executive chain, or you can also go top down or do both at the same time. So in looking at this, I think there's three key questions that you really want to set out to answer as you're thinking about your go-to-market strategies. First is like, what companies do you want to sell to? And what about those companies makes them an ideal fit for your solution? We'll dive into that in a little bit. Then the next one is buyer persona. Who are they? And one question that I think is really telling is like, where do they hang out? So you can effectively go to those places and reach them. So for example, if you're selling to CISOs, they're going to hang out in different places than the security users or developers. On the user front, a key question is, how will they discover you? How will they naturally like stumble upon your solution, whether that's through like paid ads or through like a marketplace or through existing tools that they already use, so that you can optimize for not only like them finding you through your marketing efforts, but also how they find you through their natural like day-to-day habits. And if you dive into this a little bit further, you can go into different characteristics of these people. So, for example, there we go. So, for example, for the company, what about the tech stack makes them unique? Can you support their entire tech stack, or is there something specific, like perhaps they just have to be like an AWS user for your product to work? What about their business model makes your company specifically more valuable to them? Or what about the team sizes? So, for example, at Snyk, we're selling to security teams and engineering teams. And if we looked at the composition of the engineering teams versus like the security teams and the DevOps teams, we could get a better idea of how modern the engineering teams are and like what technologies they use. So then we can optimize our resources internally to sell to those very specific companies because they have a higher chance of like converting. On the buyer personas, you have what are their specific challenges and what are their like motivations and metrics that they're like measured on. If you can deeply understand like those key things, then you can align your marketing and sales efforts to really pique their interest in checking you guys out, but then also solving their problems and helping them get promoted internally by having a true impact not only on their business but also on their careers. Same thing goes with like user personas, but in this case, have a look at their think about their preferences. What do they want to spend their time on? What can you take off their plate? Do they have a preference to specific tools, and why are those preferences the case? If you can understand those preferences, then you can better design your product and talk about your product within that context. So we talked a little bit about the modern go-to-market motion going bottom up and top down at the same time, and the ideal customer profile, the buyer personas, and the user profiles. Understanding all of those key characteristics really help inform how you go about your marketing, how you go about your sales, how do you go about building educational materials so you can help your users get better at what they do, how to design the product so that's most useful to those users, but then also how do you build a community around their motivations, preferences, and what they want to do. I think there's huge value in terms of building a community around your product. Those users will not only help other users understand how to use it, but come up with creative ways to use the product. It's also a great avenue for gathering product feedback because those users are typically if they're in the community, they're typically pretty active, and they want to help you succeed in the beginning. Because again, in the beginning, you're really targeting your the early adopters. The early adopters love being a part of the creation process of the company. So leverage that, create a community for them, make it easy for them to get engaged, provide feedback, and so on. So now, in terms of Paul Graham, the founder of Y Combinator, he has his whole mantra at Y Combinator is build something that people want. So how do you build something that people want, and do that in a very thoughtful way? From the companies that I've been at, especially the more successful ones, they've leveraged design partners to help them build even from like the very beginning, even before writing any lines of code. And so everything that they build has been alongside a customer that's within their ideal persona, that they're ideally solving for. That way, everything that they build is really, they know, is going to help that customer or solve some of their problems. So finding these ideal partners are really critical, but the following are a couple things that you want to look for. So we talked about ICP. You want it to be within your ICP, because those are going to be the customers you're optimizing the product for. Urgency is also key. There needs to be a pressing problem that they want to solve. If not, the design partnership can kind of go off the rails, or it might be hard to engage with them or get active feedback. So you want to make sure that where you are and where they are lines up nicely in terms of like motivations, and so that as you're building something, there's urgency on their side as well to work with you within those time constraints. On the capacity front, you want to make sure that they actually have, well, first off, the technical skills and the resourcing or time to actually dedicate towards helping you build. So, for example, you may, on the tech front, if they're not representing your ideal customer profile or ideal tech stack that you're going to support, then it becomes challenging to really build towards your ideal customer profile. Over time, you're not only building with design partners to building something that's that people will want, or optimizing for that, but you're also creating your first cohort of raving fans that can turn into your first set of customers. And this is really key. Those people, or people at those design partners, they're enthusiastic about what they do. They want to continue supporting you. They just helped you build some unique features or functionality that's helping them, and so naturally they're going to believe in you a lot more. You can leverage those relationships and champions to gather stories from them, and leverage those stories to then go to market to help attract new customers. So, for example, at the company that Daz, our first set of customers actually came from those design partners and working with them for the first 6 months. Then we converted them into paying customers. And then our next wave was really taking those references and customers, their stories, out to market to the next set. So the next key thing is, how do you operationalize product feedback? The two companies that had significant valuations, Acquia, $1 billion exit, and Snyk, $8.6 billion valuation, is they really optimized how they went about creating a continuous loop between the product and engineering teams and the go-to-market teams. So going back to the start of the conversation, it all started with having a hypothesis. And as you think about your hypotheses, these can change over time, and they could be from a very high-level vision to maybe a hypothesis about a specific capability within your product. But how are you going to test that hypothesis, and then how are you going to measure the success of that hypothesis, whether it's going to be true or false? Within this area, it's ideal to have a unique point of view, because that's going to test something that's kind of at the frontier of what people want to do. A lot of times you're either building a better mousetrap and you have a point of view of why your mousetrap is going to be better, or you're coming to market with a completely new solution, and that's going to take a new point of view to say, hey, well, this hasn't existed because of X, Y, and Z. This is why it needs to be there. So in terms of what I've seen product and engineering teams do, is they really leverage the relationships that are being built out in the field by the sales teams, customer success, and solution engineers. And at the beginning of the build stage, they would test before building, coding the product. They would test mock-ups with the design partners, gather feedback, integrate that feedback into further designs before actually building some level of like an MVP of that product or like capability. And these are things that you want to set up on an ongoing cadence. So what I've seen is typically like bi-weekly design partner meetings work really well, where you come to the table with not only ways to like support those design partners and how they use the product, but then also introducing new ideas or concepts or new designs for how to test them. And then after you've sort of gotten that feedback, then it's really important to sell, basically go back and forth between building and selling, and then selling those new capabilities to ideally your ideal customer profile, but doing this in an outbound way. A lot of times in the beginning, you're selling to friends and family, people that are close to the company. They're going to provide you feedback. It's mostly going to be positive because they're your friends, they're your family, they're within your close networks. But what you're really trying to seek out is alternative points of view that are going to challenge your hypothesis to get to that truth and the reality. And to get there, you ideally want to optimize for going outbound to companies that haven't heard of your product, to test, what is their receptiveness to like what you're actually like building. Over time, there's a number of ways you can integrate and operationalize feedback from those meetings. At Snyk, we had solution engineers capture additional product needs or gaps in the products that were preventing sales, and they would capture them, tie them to opportunities, and then measure the frequency of how often those objections or needs came up, so that over time you start to build up a repository of saying, hey, this product or feature or gap is actually impacting 90% of our potential revenue in our pipeline, versus this feature over here that may only be impacting or blocking like 10 or 20%. So we got really good at capturing those ongoing needs and feedback, tying it to dollars and the impact and how much of the pipeline it would actually like unlock. And then we would use that to determine what we wanted to build next. That would obviously flow back into, measuring our hypothesis, but then also going back and testing those new features with like the design partners. From there, then you're obviously landing some customers, and that's an additional area where you can capture really interesting insights. You're going to get insights from customers during the sales process, and they're going to tell you, a bit of the story, a bit of why they're buying, or what their success criteria is for like a POC. But they're not going to tell you the whole story. You get the whole story after the sale. So it's really valuable to once you land your customers, to go back to them after some onboarding, seeing some success, and ask them, how are you measuring the impact of the product today? And ask three key questions to understand the three whys. Why solve the problem? Why solve it now or buy now? And why choose your company to solve those problems? And those stories are going to create some really nice references, because those you're going to figure out really quickly who your champions are, who will act as references. But then also they'll provide a lot of material for your case studies and for the sales team to go and land your next cohort of customers. And so you see this being like a continuous cycle. You have hypothesis, you're testing it with design partners, product and engineering is highly engaged in your first set of customers, and your sales teams taking that, selling it in an outbound way to get non-friends and family feedback, landing those sales, and then measuring their impact, understanding the 3 whys, and then leveraging those new insights to go and land additional customers. And I talked a little bit about this before I got a little bit ahead of myself in terms of doing discovery before and after a sale. Why solve the problem? Why your solution? That's really, really key in terms of understanding why they chose you over the competition. And that enables you to really double down on those key differentiators. And when you go up against those competitors again, being able to tell those stories, especially now in the macroeconomic climate, budgets are being stalled, budgets are being reduced. It's really hard to get new products in the door. So tying your value proposition to these stories, like why solve the problem, what's the impact, what's the business value, but then also like why do it now? That's going to help you create more urgency to get customers to purchase now versus waiting a little while, after things pick back up in the economy. So the next interesting thing is we've talked about, how do you design a product alongside design partners to optimize building something that people really want. And we've also talked about your ideal customer profile, your buyer personas, and your user personas. And now the next thing is to take all of that information and figure out, okay, well, how do I go of the ocean of accounts out there? How do I go and sell to the ones that are going to be most likely to buy your solution? Because in the early days of a startup, you have limited resources, you have limited time, and you need to show significant progress fast. So one thing that we did at Sneak was we created an account scoring system so that we could. The idea was to figure out, what are our best fit accounts for our product that are most likely to buy. So we looked at it in the framework of a modern development score. So we looked at to take a step back, since we're pricing on engineering's or how many developers a company have, the dev count was a key metric. But then we also looked at cloud security. We looked at DevOps, the composition of these teams internally. And we leveraged the hypothesis approach to say, a company that has DevOps teams, has a certain size security team or cloud team, is likely to have a more modern development and engineering process than other companies. So we took this information and we used one way to do this is through a product called Clay.Run. We were able to scrape the web to look up different characteristics of these companies. So we would count the number of developers. We would count, does this company have AppSec engineers job openings or cloud security engineer job openings. We looked at what types of technologies are they hiring for or in those profiles, and from there we designed a rating system that built upon those things. So, certain dev counts would gain a specific score. So say, anywhere between like 0 and 150 developers got 1 point. Then 150 developers to 500 developers got 2 points, and so on. We built up an initial scoring system. We looked at that and applied it to our existing customers to say, okay, do our existing customers who are our best fits actually score high on this? So is our rating system actually useful in terms of identifying those accounts? And then we use it to input different accounts in different territories to figure out what are the best accounts to actually go after first. So which ones score highest, meet our ideal customer profile, and then from there, once we prioritize those accounts, then we can go leverage our ideal buyer persona and user profile maps to create marketing material, sales material to go after those customers, both from like a bottoms up and a top down strategy. On the angel investing side, and since I've been part of 5 different early stage startups, but then also talking to founders very frequently about their products, their go-to-market strategies. As you're building your initial like go-to-market strategies and thinking about those motions, one thing I see in the market is that first-time founders are highly focused on like the product. How do you build the product? How do you build something that people want? So on and so forth, which is really great. What you learn through going through that and being in a lot of early stage companies or talking to lots of founders is that it's not only about the product, but it's also about distribution. So find a lot of, if you've gone through like one startup or founded one startup, I see that a lot of second time founders or repeat founders think about not only the product, but also the distribution. And it's a really important question. So how do you differentiate your product, but also how do you think about distribution strategies from your competitors, and how do you differentiate around that? So for example, at Sneak, we had a PLG motion, bottoms up. Users could go in and test the product for free, use a level of the product over time for free, and then upsell and then upgrade to additional like packages. And so users at all sorts of different companies were signing up, using the product. Oftentimes, like that one user would lead to multiple users at an account, and then that made that really easy for the sales team to continue to go bottoms up, go to the next layer, but also go top down with a conversation that says, hey, your users or employees are actually already using our product. They're getting these benefits from it, but there's all these other additional benefits that you can gain from it. So let's talk about how we can amplify the impact of our product that you're already using today to some degree. And that was a really easy conversation starter. And contrast to Daz, the company I was just at, we didn't have a PLG motion. We were going, top down directly to CISOs to get them to buy into, our vision and product, and that's much harder because you don't have that usage to kind of build upon. So saw those two different angles of how to go to market. The other is in terms of distribution. Are there marketplaces out there that you can add your product to? Are there integrations to other products that your users already use that that you can build into, so that as they're using other products, they're kind of stumbling upon your product and then leading to some of that organic usage. So think about that in terms of how do you differentiate around your product, but also how do you differentiate around your go-to-market strategies. And if you think about those two things in context of your ideal customer profile, your buyer personas, user personas, I think you'll be a lot more successful in landing those first customers and scaling to your next several cohorts of customers. So here's an example of how Sneak did it. This was actually Sneak's one of their first original pitch deck. So most security tools are sold top down, and a lot of security tools or CISOs have challenges getting the rest of the team to really use those use those products. So Sneak wanted to take a different approach. Instead of doing the typical marketing, instead of doing the typical like sales team, or going to the typical like security events, or starting off with like a high price point, they wanted to do the complete opposite. So instead of marketing, they focus on developer relations and integrating themselves into the community. So what that means is, instead of going to these big name conferences, they would go to developer events. So there's tons of like user groups for different open source communities. We would have developer relations teams not go in and pitch the product, but they would go in and help provide education around a specific topic, for example, like security for developers. Instead of going top down and pushing your product onto the market, they want to use a pull model with that self-serve try, use, and then buy. Talked a little bit about developer events, and then instead of going and trying to land that like $1 million deal, you start off with free, and then scaling prices that can really meet the customer where they are in terms of, hey, maybe we just want to start with a single team or multiple teams, but being able to create a pricing methodology that scales with usage, so that you could land, prove value, expand, prove more value, and then really explode and sell to the entire company. So I really love this this framework, and I think you can use it yourself too. If you look at your competitors, where are they spending their time, and how can you do things differently from them to kind of cut through the noise and set yourself apart and reach those key people in a different way. Finally, one of my favorite quotes that kind of pulls all of this together. In startup, you have limited resources, limited time. Hopefully I gave you some things to think about in terms of how to optimize your time for targeting the right people, the right companies, how to build a product that people really want, and leveraging design partners to help you get there, leveraging design partners to land your first customers, capturing those stories to then go and find your next ideal customers to tackle. But I think Paul Graham, the founder of Y Combinator, sums it up pretty nicely. Be relentlessly resourceful. And that is my talk. Happy to answer and open this up for like any questions. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn or shoot me an email. I'm at alexjlindahl@gmail.com. Also wanted to say thank you to Spiky.ai for letting me represent them. If you're in marketing or sales, product engineering, and you're looking for deeper insights into your customer conversations, definitely check them out. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Alex. Very insightful. So, of course, now is the part where we open it up to the Q&A. So if you have anything that you want to ask Alex, use that tab, type your questions in there, and I'll relay them across to him. Just to kind of open the field, Alex, obviously, with you being involved in a bunch of different funding efforts, right, and startups, and you kind of doing this for quite a few years now, right? Obviously, there's a big change in the market at the moment. Things are starting to shrink. People are starting to kind of like realize the valuations are getting a bit nutty. I was wondering from your perspective, like, what kind of changes have you noticed about the way that you and also the businesses around you approach getting funding?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So one of the key big shifts that I'm seeing is that we're moving from an era that purely cared about growth at all costs to a market that cares about growing efficiently with the right level of like resourcing. So as companies are going to market or going to get more funding, I think you want to change your story and focus more on how are we going to do this with being more capital efficient, and think about like realistic like targets, because investors want to see people building a business that's actually sustainable these days, and focus on like the revenue, but doing that within reasonable bounds. So I think being able to tell that story and like how you're being efficient, choosing efficient go to market strategies to land customers or revenue, I think that's going to be like really key.
Okay, it's interesting to hear you say that. Like, do you think that that applies at all kind of levels, or is that more kind of like a grassroots, smaller systems? Because obviously, I think the one that always comes to mind for a lot of people is I always think of Amazon, right, and how they funded 99% of the different choices and businesses they've gone into, basically from AWS, and they can
Mhm.
afford to operate at a loss. Do you think that even that kind of mentality is going to have to change? Because of course, at the end of the day, a lot of these companies of that size are they have to answer to the public, right? People that are willing to invest in that stock.
Yeah, so I think Amazon is definitely a specific their own beast, so to
Yeah.
speak, because they definitely how they build products and invest in them and reduce their spend on marketing is much different than uh, the typical public company. But I think we're seeing it at all stages, from like early stage, Series A, Series B, to the like the public companies. I think it's all people are all companies are rotating to focus on like efficiencies, and that's part of the reason why we're seeing all of these layoffs, is that they want to, like, one key metric is like how much revenue do you get per head count. One easy way of doing that is reducing head count, but also like how do you with those fewer people or employees, how do you get to the same result, or um, so yeah, to answer your question, I think we're seeing it like at all levels,
Definitely.
all
I
companies
think.
levels.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was just gonna say it kind of goes to that whole idea of what we've been seeing today from some of the other speakers is also, I think, a feeling of like changing the narrative, right? Of the
Mhm.
way that you target your users, right? It's like traditionally it used to be his X millions of dollars, go ham with the advertising. Like, is that another big thing you notice is that this is requirement to understand what your goal is with your budgeting spend and to not necessarily just take a broad stroke approach to it?
Yeah, I think people are, well, marketing teams, sales teams are looking way more closely at like the ROI of different spends. Whether it's like the products that, or SaaS, subscriptions that they're using, to looking at maybe there are different marketing strategies. I think everyone's asking, okay, if we do X, what's going to be the ROI? How are we going to measure it? How are we going to prove that, yeah, we spent these dollars, and they're actually like getting us somewhere? Because a year ago, yeah, just doing anything for growth, and I don't think people were looking as closely as like what's the actual like return on some of these things.
No one ever really thought about the ceiling, right? It's like, the classic kind of meme for one is to the moon that everyone likes to use. And it did get to that stage.
It was also just so much easier to go and get more funding.
Mhm.
So people didn't worry too or nearly as much about, their runway. Now
Yeah,
people are thinking way more consciously, or being more conscious about the runway that they have. And you got to assume that it's going to be a lot harder to get that next round of funding. So you got to increase your runway, and be more thoughtful about, where you're spending your dollars.
definitely. I think, like, when you look on the more kind of like government and country based side of that, right? Where, for example, the low interest rates and the ease of getting money, I'd say, is kind of it's drying up, right? Because I think the classic one I always remember from like reading Rich Dad Poor Dad is, nowadays it's not like you hear your parents say about how hard it is to, like, to get money. That's not true anymore, and I think we're kind of starting to see the reverse
Yeah,
come in, right, where even though this cash is all digitalized, as you already stated, there's a clear requirement to show me the money, right? Show me where I'm going to see progress in 2 or 3 years, not 10.
exactly.
Okay, I think that about does it, though. I won't keep you too much longer. It has been an absolute pleasure to talk to you, Alex. Just going to bring that back
Likewise.
on the screen. If people want to get a hold of you, they can via your Gmail account there. and I'm sure you're going to be well more than welcoming to hear from a bunch of people. But folks,
Happy to talk to anyone.
there you go. Don't worry, that was eager, the right amount, and I love it. So, Alex, I'm going to let you go. Absolute pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining us, and hopefully we'll hear again from you soon.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
This is all we got. Remember the revolution in our minds. This is all we got.
Lock me out of this life institution. I am angry.